Cool. I've heard the sound, so I'm going to start. All right. So thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for coming. It's really interesting. Wow, my name is Bruna. It's really interesting because I usually just go to like horror conferences. So I'm used to always having like horror people, and now I'm branching out. And I've branched out once, and then I realized that I was too horrific for the specific conference. So hopefully that won't happen today. But I'm really happy to be here to be talking about rape revenge films. And you can see like rape revenge trauma narratives, which is something that I try to add when I talk about rape revenge films, but that will make sense later. All right, so yes, my talk called The Female Body in Rape Revenge Trauma Narratives means that I'll be focusing on the female body. So to start, so in recent years, rape revenge films have undergone a profound transformation, particularly in how they portray the female body. The talk explores this transformation, focusing on two key moments: the depiction of the female body in rape sequences and in revenge sequences. So traditionally, these films have often framed women as passive, voiceless victims during the rape scenes and as hyper-aggressive, one-dimensional avengers in the rape revenge sequences, all within the sensationalized voyeuristic narratives. However, as more women engage with the subgenre, the portrayal of the female body has shifted, challenging these exploitative conventions. So by examining this reconfiguration, we can better understand how contemporary filmmakers are reshaping the subgenre, moving away from objectification and towards narratives that reclaim agency and emphasize trauma over spectacle. So as Sam said, I'll be talking for about 35 to 40 to 45 minutes. It really depends on how well I pronounce words. And I'll try my best to keep it engaging. So as Sam said, I'll be showing some clips along the way. And the structure of the talk will follow two key aspects of the subgenre. So I'll focus on first on the rape sequences, and then I'll move on to the revenge sequences. And of course, as a note of caution, I will be addressing sexual violence, and at times the discussion will be a little bit graphic. I will try to handle the material as best as I can with care and respect. However, please feel free to leave if at any point you feel uncomfortable with the material. All right. So to start, rape and the female body. I think it's a good place to start by looking at the film I Spit on Your Grave. So for those who have not seen the film, it follows Jennifer Hills, a young writer who retreats to a secluded cabin to work on her novel. And then shortly after arriving, she's brutally attacked, raped, and left for dead by a group of local men. Sometime after, Jennifer seeks revenge by systematically hunting down and killing each of her attackers. So the rape scenes are, in Carol Clover's words, problematic due to the incessant focus on her tortured body. And according to Barbara Creed, Jennifer becomes a complete and total victim. In the scenes, as she's hunted down, degraded, humiliated, and tortured. Creed also notes that the rapes include vaginal, anal, and oral penetration, as well as rape with a beer bottle. And in addition to being beaten, kicked, and punched, her creative work, which is her novel, is derided and desecrated. In Creed's point of view and mine, Jennifer's humiliation and subjection are dwelt on and drawn out. The depiction of rape in I Spit on Your Grave serves as a prime example of how the female body is frequently reduced to a mere object in rape revenge narratives. So of course, I am by no means, sorry, just moving my thingy. I am by no means the first person to talk about I Spit on Your Grave, nor will I be the last one, but it's important to start with this film as it provides a blueprint for my analysis. Several films follow this depiction and portray the woman as an abject thing, to borrow from Creed, naked and vulnerable, while the rapists show an extreme level of sadistic enjoyment. I'd like to turn my attention to another film, Savage Streets. Again, if you've not seen it, it follows Brenda, played by horror royalty Linda Blair, a tough high school student who leads a group of friends called the Satins. And after her deaf sister, Heather, is brutally raped by a gang of violent thugs, and one of her friends is murdered, she takes matters into her own hands, and then she's armed with a crossbow. In fierce determination, she embarks on a mission of violent revenge against the gang responsible. So I'd like to show the trailer here because it really shows the points that I'm trying to make. But I'll talk a little bit about it after, just to give more context. So Sam, So don't you just love those trailers that show all of the film? So of course, as you could have seen here, Savage Streets is much more sensationalized than the gritty I Spit at a Grave, especially in the revenge sequences. However, there are two relevant points here that the film raises which are important to highlight. First, the film objectifies a female body beyond the act of rape. So several scenes depict abuse where women are forcibly touched and their clothes are violently stripped off, especially in that scene of that we saw in the trailer where Linda Blair is fighting another woman. As she's fighting the woman, she just rips her blouse off. Carol Clover notes about the film that it's relentlessly invasive in relation to female bodies. And then second, different elements of the film, such as the mise-en-scène and cinematography, are utilized to highlight Heather's status as an object. So while this I Spit on a Grave offers close-up on Jennifer and the rapists, both aligning the viewer with the rapists and denouncing them as animals, as Clover's analysis, Savage Streets presents the scene through multiple high-angle shots which emphasize Heather's powerlessness compared to the towering men who encircle her. So the rape scene intercuts with a scene in the girls' bathroom where Heather's sister, Brenda, fights with another classmate. It's not that fight that we saw on the trailer, it's another one. Admittedly, that is not necessarily a rape scene, but the placement in the middle of a rape sequence is notable, especially as it showcases the female body in a titillating manner and compounds the objectification of women catering to men's sexual fantasy. And I compare that scene to the opening of Carrie, where we've got young women naked grabbing each other under the shower. But the scene is saturated with male gaze, seemingly offering the viewer a reprieve from any moral discomfort that they may have felt during the rape scene. And when the sequence moves back to Heather's assault, her clothes are torn off, she's beaten, and she's humiliated. And we see that quite clearly in the scene. And then finally, her objectification becomes complete as one of the rapists draws a circle around her nipples with red lipstick, marking her as a target and entertainment for men. I like to add another point here that arises in rape revenge films, which is the unwilling turned willing victim. The most obvious examples is Straw Dogs, as the female character, Amy, she pleads no to her rapists, but then because her rapist is her ex-boyfriend, her no's become very quickly yeses. And just to illustrate my point, I like to focus on another film, Death Wish 2, as it combines several elements that we discussed above. So this film here, for those who have not seen or have not seen the franchise, follows Paul Kersey, who lives in Los Angeles after moving, with his traumatized daughter, Carol, who is raped in the first film. However, their lives are shattered again when a gang attacks their home, killing their housekeeper and abducting Carol, who dies during the rape. This tragedy reignites Paul's vigilant crusade as he seeks to avenge those responsible. In the film, Carol is gang raped by a group of criminals, and the scene here, which is the pictures that I have, it works in a way that the assault is observed by other men who become aroused by it, and the horror of the female character is suffering is downplayed in order to privilege voyeuristic pleasures. So Carol lies down silently. She's not pushing away the rapists, and that is mistaken for consent and pleasure. The subsequent shots are close-up of the rapist's face, the other men who are watching as well, Carol's breasts, which are carefully fondled by the attacker. And the only sound in the scene is the attacker's breathing and moaning, which together with the close-up shots is constructed almost like a passionate act. So the scene seems to have been thought of by someone reading from the male gaze playbook. So the woman is literally dissected when the camera cuts from shot to shot of her body. So we see her stomach, her neck, her breasts, and she becomes a total object here, so a total victim. So it's a really intense scene to watch, honestly. So all of the examples that I've mentioned here, Ice, Peter and Graves, Savage Streets, Straw Dogs, and Death Wish 2, among several other films, were all directed by men. And before continuing, I want to clarify something. So while I'm comparing male and female directed films, I do not subscribe to the essentialist views of filmmaking. So I don't believe that there is an inherently male or female way of creating films. However, scholars such as Laura Mulvey, Patricia Pisters, and Alison Pierce have noted, our lived experiences shape how we see the world. So this means that certain themes may be explored with more nuance or emphasis when women direct. And I'm careful to avoid broad generalization here. So when I say male directors often portray or female directors are frequently used, I am referring to the films I've studied. So while the majority of the films follow the trends, I acknowledge that not all of them do. And I'm trying not to make sweeping claims about entire genders. Having said that, female-directed scenes often depict sexual assault in very different ways. So the first thing to notice is that in the films that I've mentioned, the rape scenes are quite long. So part of the criticism they have received is that the length at which the female body is heavily violated. This has led scholars to claim that the length of the scene alone is a sufficient way to conceal eroticized violence while still conveying the horrifying nature of rape. This observation holds true for several films. In Revenge, for example, Jen, a young woman, is invited by her lover, Richard, to a secluded desert villa, and she's raped by one of his friends, Stan. And the build-up to the assault emphasizes Stan's intimidation of Jen, making her eventual realization of what is about to happen palpable, and invites the viewer to experience the event from her perspective. As the scene unfolds, Stan corners Jen and presses her against a glass wall. The camera pans away, withholding any explicit depiction of sexual assault, while still acknowledging its presence. The choice allows the viewer to understand the gravity of the situation without subjecting them to graphic imagery, emphasizing the psychological impact on Jen rather than sensationalizing the violence. However, I would claim that more important than simply the length of the scene is how the scene is constructed and whose perspective it adopts. So I've mentioned before that in addition to portraying rape in a shorter scene, Revenge invites the audience to experience the assault from Jen's perspective. Another film is American Mary. So in the film, Mary is a medical student and she is raped by her professor, Dr. Grant, at a university party. He uses a camcorder to record the assault. He mounts her, he slaps her, and he inserts his fingers into her mouth, actions that highlight his power, objectification, and degradation of Mary. Yet we experience this violation through her perspective. As she's drugged, her point of view becomes increasingly hazy, creating a sense of disorientation. And prior to this, the film establishes Mary as out of place. So she's afraid of her superiors with a palpable sense of danger as Dr. Grant takes her to the bedroom. This perspective shift adds a layer of emotional depth to the scene, allowing the viewer to feel the growing tension and Mary's vulnerability. Another example here is Descent, which follows Maya, a college artist, who is raped by Jared, a fellow student. The assault scene, though brief at 3 minutes compared to I Spit on Your Grave's 25 minutes, is shown from start to finish. So we can see that it shows the entirety of the rape. However, it focuses entirely on Maya's perspective. So the scene is constructed, both Jared and Maya, they go on a date, they come back home, and Jared tries to take things further while Maya refuses. However, of course, he ignores her refuses, and he rapes her while whispering racial slurs in her ears. The camera remains throughout the whole thing focused on Maya's face, therefore highlighting her subjectivity and the violence of the act. And I claim here that the film Descent is an example of how removing a sexual assault scene from a film isn't automatically necessary to avoid a negative portrayal of gendered violence. The film demonstrates that rape can be depicted in its entirety without sensationalizing it, depending on how the scene is constructed. This contrasts with I Spit on a Grave, which sensationalizes assault through unnecessary detail and nudity. Lastly, I want to focus, as I just mentioned, on the issue of nudity that goes hand in hand with the objectification and vulnerability of the female victims in films like I Spit on a Grave and Savage Streets. So while the films I mentioned thus far could serve as interesting examples because they all deal with nudity in specific ways, I want to focus on the film MFA. The film tells the story of Noelle, an art student who becomes a victim of sexual assault at a fraternity party by her classmate, Luke. So during the rape scene, Noelle is left dressed while her rapist, Luke, completely unclothes himself. So during the rape scene, there is a full reverse of nudity expectation on this scene. And moreover, the way that the shot is framed, we will see a little bit of that on the trailer. So the way that it's framed helps to convey Luke as the embodiment of an other. So Luke, he positions himself behind Noelle, and the camera is strategically positioned alongside her face. So the focus is on her, making her the primal focal point of the camera. Meanwhile, in the background, Luke remains intentionally excluded from the frame. So we don't see his face. We only see his body. So he becomes an identified body, what I call an avatar for the other rapists that Noelle will later kill. This scene further subverts the idea that rape shrinks a woman's body to an object to be desired, as it allows Noelle to maintain her individuality while rendering Luke to an anonymous figure symbolizing male aggression. So I'd like to show you the trailer of this film now. So, I mean, just from the trailer, you can see how different those films are and what the focus of those films. So while Savage Streets ends with, I don't know, the only law is eye for an eye, something like that. Here we've got something completely different. Anyway, so yeah, those films, in those films, the female body does not play the same role as it does in male-directed scenes. So showing male-directed scenes which show the body in distress, and they don't necessarily convey the terrible effects of rape. However, in female-directed films, they present violation not simply as an assault on the body, but a violation of humanity and attack on a personhood, on a person itself. So the focus shifts away from any potential sadistic satisfaction, centering on the trauma and the humanization inflicted on the victim. So that brings me to the avenger. So as we transition from the depiction of sexual violence to the theme of revenge, it is essential to recognize that the portrayal of the avenger is just as significant as the preceding rape scenes in shaping the representation of the female body. And of course, because of time constraints here, I'm going to exclude from my talk 3 elements which are super important to be analyzed for a wider comprehension of rape revenge films, which is the specific method of revenge, revenge by proxy, and the internal transformation of the avenger. So the following discussion here, I'm going to argue that the avenger's external transformation is often excessively sexualized and frequently adheres to the male gaze, ultimately depicting the avenger as a femme castratrice, rooted in the myth of the vagina dentata. So before looking at the films, I'm going to provide just a brief explanation of those 2 terms that I've just used, the vagina dentata and the femme castratrice. So according to Creed, the femme castratrice is a female figure representing male fears of castration or harm by women. She often seeks revenge on the men who have wronged her, underscoring the perceived threat women pose in a patriarchal society. The vagina dentata myth depicts, of course, a vagina with teeth, symbolizing the fear that women can inflict harm or castration on men. The myth encapsulates male anxieties about female sexuality and power. Both concepts are closely related, as they reflect those specific fears. So while the vagina dentata serves as a metaphor for the perceived threat of female genitalia, the femme castratrice literalizes the myth by actively embodying the danger in seeking vengeance against men. So through her actions, she transforms metaphorical fears into tangible violence, particularly in horror and revenge films. Rape revenge narratives literalize the fear of castration through its depiction of the victim avenger, who lures the attackers with the promise of sex and takes revenge on her rapists by castrating them. So if we go back to I Spit on Her Grave, for those who have seen and remember the film, Jennifer engages in sexual acts that lure her attackers into a false sense of security, only to them castrate them in retribution for their violence. And this act here symbolizes the fears associated with the vagina dentata, as Jennifer sexually becomes a weapon against men who sought to dominate her. So by enacting revenge in such a visceral way, the film transforms the metaphorical threat of the female genitalia into a concrete and violent reality, illustrating how the femme castratrice embodies the anxieties of male castration while reclaiming agency and power. So I'm just going to show this example here because it shows exactly what happens. So for those who have not seen The Last House on the Left, directed by Wes Craven, it's about 2 women who are raped and murdered, and then the parents of one of those women, they seek revenge on the rapists. However, while the father kills them with a chainsaw, the mother does this, which I'll show now. So that's an example of the vagina dentata and the femme castratrice all together. We've got this female avenger, and her method of revenge is to castrate men by luring them into sex, basically. So, shifting the attention here to Abel Kahar's Miss 45, the film, uh, the film serves as a compelling example of the physical transformation of the Avenger. So the film follows Tana, a mute woman living in New York City, who suffers two brutal sexual assaults in a single day. Following the second attack, she undergoes a profound transformation fueled by rage, and a thirst for violence against her attackers. So Tana stalks the streets, methodically hunting down and eliminating men that she perceives as threats. So not necessarily the men who have raped her, but basically everyone that she perceives as threats. As her quest for revenge unfolds, Tana increasingly adopts a vampish and overtly sexualized appearance as she uses revealing outfits and heavy makeup. So this is a stark contrast to her initial image, and it highlights the shift from victim to avenger, allowing her to embody the femme castretrice. The concepts of vagina dentata and femme castretrice carry a significant cultural baggage, as I mentioned, often rooted in misconceptions and stereotypes about women. These portrayals depict the vagina as a mysterious and uncharted territory, transforming women into myths and enigmas while denying their recognition as fully human. Consequently, it's not surprising that contemporary female-directed rape revenge films take a very different approach to constructing the Avenger. So in female-directed films, the removal of focus on the female body during rape scenes allows revenge sequences to explore various dimensions of justice and retribution. So I've noted two distinct possibilities for depicting revenge in these narratives. Some films choose to showcase the body as a site of resilience, turning the portrayal of the female body into a powerful symbol of survival and empowerment. So, through Jen's journey in revenge, the film challenges traditional narratives surrounding female vulnerability. So, instead of succumbing to despair, she harnesses her pain, using it to fuel her quest for revenge. This transformation is depicted through dynamic action sequences that showcase her physical prowess, agility, and resourcefulness. The film ultimately celebrates the female body not as a passive entity, but as a powerful force capable of overcoming immense adversity. Conversely, other two female-directed films opt to shift the focus away from the female body. So revenge emerges as a means to reclaim everything that was taken from the individual, not only their body, but their identity, dignity, and humanity. As such, the characters are given space to process their trauma before seeking revenge through additional act, which I call the trauma act, which focuses on the aftermath of the rape from the victim's perspective. This act emphasizes the victim's struggle to return to normalcy, their desire to be heard, and their need for accountability from both the rapist and the system. They delve into the victim's psyche, showing how their lives, relationships, and sense of self are altered by trauma, often using flashbacks to highlight the shifts. In this way, the Avenger's transformation becomes more internal than external. And while in some earlier films like Miss 45 and I Spit on Your Grave, while those films they explore the character's internal shifts, Tana rethinking her views on men and systematic abuse, and Jennifer finding solace in writing again, these films often these are often secondary to the physical transformation. And the character in these films are rarely given time to fully process their trauma. For example, in Savage Streets, Brenda avenges her sister within days of the attack. And in contrast, films like Descent and MFA, they portray women who become withdrawn and subdued, still grappling with their trauma even years later. What really shapes these characters is not just the rape itself, but the disbelief, the pushback, and the internalized guilt that they experience. In Descent, for example, Maya internalized the degrading words spoken to her during the assault. And throughout several scenes, she confronts her reflection, verbally affirming this is Lurs. As a result of this internalization, she turns to drugs and alcohol, illustrating the profound the profound impact of trauma on her sense of self. So to conclude, the transformation of rape revenge narratives significantly redefines the portrayal of the female body. Historically, these films have often objectified women, presenting them as mere victims or aggressive avengers. However, contemporary narratives, particularly those crafted by female filmmakers, explore the physical and psychological ramifications of trauma, highlighting the resilience and agency of female characters. And this evolution invites audiences to engage with the female body not as an object of a spectacle, but as a powerful site of struggle, healing, and reclamation. Thus, the portrayal of the female body in these narratives reflects a broader cultural shift toward recognizing women's experiences and voices. And that's about it. Thank you for listening.